This is Art Shed, and it's time for the show. Let's be reasonable. Of course, this is our New Year's Eve edition. So, happy New Year to everyone. Hope you enjoyed your 2023, and I wish you all a wonderful 2024. Remember, this show is about politics in the United States in particular. Uh, we have an interest in the 2024 2024 campaign for president and the cycle in general. We think that it's going to be a doozy, right? And I believe that it's only clear that as all this shapes up, it's going to be a very busy cycle. That being said, we're reasonable people. And this show is dedicated to common people who really, you know what? Look, my degree is in political science. I don't have a law degree. I do like politics, right? But at the end of the day, I'm just like everybody else. I get up every day, go to work, uh, make my way through the American economy as best I possibly can. And hopefully, at the end of the day, I'm a little bit richer, right? So I'm no different than anyone else. I believe the people that I'm speaking to are reasonable people, just like myself, and that's who this show is dedicated to. So that being the case, folks, it's the weekend. We're gonna go ahead and start our top 5 news stories of the week. Got to tell you, this last week was a light news cycle. So some of these stories you may have heard before, but they're worth repeating. I've been talking about them on shorts and in other places as well. So let's just go ahead and dive right into this. There's a football game I'm really trying to get to in order to watch. I got friends that are text messaging me message about the Indianapolis Colts and Raiders game. I do have it on, so if you see me go a little crazy because Raiders score, that's just part of the story. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the top 5. When we come to the top 5 news stories of the week, we land at the number 5 spot, and we have to talk about Trump. And of course, he received some more news from the courts in that they denied his claim of immunity based on presidential immunity. So I'm going to pull that up so you can take a look at it, and we'll talk about it on the other side. In a nutshell, what you have here is one of many cases. And I got to tell you, I think that there are probably about there's so many cases. I can show you that. There are so many dismissals that have been filed that it's kind of hard to keep track of them all, right? But this is one in a long string of dismissals that has cropped up and that will continue to crop up with regard to Trump trying to get all of these cases dismissed. These are just dismissals related to the Jan 6. So this is brought to you by Just Security, but it's a really good clearinghouse on all of the cases out there, something for you to kind of take a look at because there's a lot of them. But anyway, he's trying to get a case dismissed for numerous reasons, right? But so far unsuccessfully. I think that they will continue to press for a dismissal, and they will continue to be met with denials. And of course, this too will make its way to the Supreme Court. Remember, they ignored a brief amicus brief earlier from the Justice Department asking them to fast track this immunity question. Obviously, that didn't happen, right? So this is going to make its way to the Supreme Court. They'll render a decision, and of course, we'll be on down the road from there. But there will be plenty of dismissals of motions to dismiss along the way. So, hey, look, this is one case, like I just showed you. There's several cases out there. Again, this is the reason why this election cycle sets up to be a pretty busy cycle. There's just a whole lot going on as it pertains to Donald Trump and the 91 counts that he was indicted on. So that being the case, just look forward to more of this happen this week. I know it looks familiar. It should look familiar because we've seen a lot of them. All right, so that's the number 5 story. I told you this is going to go pretty quick today. In the number 4 spot, we have to talk about these 14th Amendment cases, right? And I told you that when it comes to these 14th Amendment cases, it's all about the language, right? you have two states now that have said that he doesn't deserve to be on the primary ballot. So places like Colorado and Maine said no to being on the ballot, or to him being on the ballot. Michigan and California said it's okay for him to remain on the ballot. And I thought it was interesting what Gavin Newsom said out in California. He said that Trump not being on the ballot is more of a distraction than him being on the ballot. In a nutshell, I'm paraphrasing him, but that was the gist of it, and that's probably right. All of it hinges on the language and how it is viewed. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and I tell you, I did say earlier this week that this is going to land at the Supreme Court, and they're going to have to answer a few questions for us. One was about the oath of office that the president takes. Is it different than the oath that other people take? I don't think so. And in the language here, it just says an oath taken by a member, right, of Congress, or as an officer of the United States. I believe the president is an officer of the United States. Now, remember, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a guy with a political science degree who likes to look at a lot of this stuff. And when you look at the other language, there's a discrepancy, or I think, as to who is responsible for making the decision as to whether or not he is to be on a ballot, or anyone is to be on a ballot or can seek an office, right? Because I believe this process is more political than it is legal. And what do I mean by that? I'm saying that the people get lost in the due process question of this, but there isn't any due process in most of these cases, because it's a political questions that's being answered. And in order to make that clear, I asked the question as to how many cases or precedents is there with regard to the Section 3? And there are only 8 cases. And in the 8 cases that you look at, what you will see, I thought that this section here, convicted of a crime, is important for most people to understand and note that there are 8 cases out here, and of the 8, there are only 2 individuals who have been convicted of a crime. So when you think of it again, I think it lends itself more to the fact that it's a political question. And in most cases, well, I kind of recall a professor of mine saying once before that where there is a lack of precedence in a case, you generally will find politics. So in this particular issue, I think I see that bearing its fruit, because you got 8 cases. I mean, and you got to say that there had to be over thousands of people especially during the Civil War period and thereafter, shortly after, that were probably eligible, but either those cases didn't happen because they were political. Those individuals know they couldn't get on the ballot anyway. So in this case, a lot of people are looking for the due process, but again, I don't think the due process exists, because the question that's being answered or needs to be answered is one that is more political in nature than anything else. Again, the 8 cases that are out there kind of support the fact that it's political. All right, so at the end of the day, this does end up at the Supreme Court. I did tell you they have the question about whether the president takes a different oath. There's a question as to who's responsible for removing the president or removing the presidential candidate from the ballot. And there are some cases out there where Neil Gorsuch in 2012, they removed a person from the ballot, or he supported the removal of a person from the ballot who was seeking the office of the presidency. Democrats are using that case. However, I think it's a flimsy case, because in the 2 issues that they bring up, these individuals were not natural born citizens. So it doesn't legally sit on all fours. So it's not something that we can compare apples to apples, right? So that being said, do look forward to the answer from the Supreme Court. And I hope that it is a 9-0 decision. I dread the fact if it comes back 6-3, because 6-3 only ratchets up the angst and the pain in this country when it comes to the political discourse, right? So hopefully we get an answer from the Supreme Court when we get it pretty soon. But the gist of it will be hopefully one that is favorable to all the people. All right, so that's the fourth story, right? On to the third story of the week. We have to talk about Nikki Haley, right? And I'm not going to hit this real hard, but Nikki Haley was in New Hampshire, and the question was asked, who was responsible for the Civil War, or what was responsible for the Civil War, and she just kind of him and hauled around it. So I'm going to play a little bit of this, but I think I can probably sew up what she's really trying to say. So,
yes, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Please, what was the cause of the United States Civil War?
Well, don't come with an easy question or anything. I mean, I think
first of all, it is an easy question.
The cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do. What do you think the cause of the Civil War was?
I note the guy sitting over here as he puts his hand over his mouth, and he's kind of looking downward. He's not necessarily sold on this answer yet, but let her continue.
I mean, I think it always comes down to the role of government and what the rights of the people are. And I will always stand by the fact that I think government was intended to secure the rights and freedoms of the people. It was never meant to be.
Okay, I could play the rest of it, but I think you heard enough of the word salad, right? So I think this is what Nikki Haley was trying to say. At the gist of it, most people, especially in the South, when you're arguing this point, they like to hang their hat on the issue of states' rights. It's a states' rights issue, and it's an economic issue, right? And I'm a proponent of several things being true at the same time. And I will tell you that at the root of the states' rights issue and at the root of the economic issue, you have to land on the issue of slavery. And the reason why you have to land on the issue of slavery and why it's important for her to say it is only because if you didn't have 1619, where slaves were introduced into this country, it wouldn't have made its way or possible for 1776, right? And from 1776 to 1860, we saw a tumultuous period. Compromises were made, right? Between northern states and southern states on the issue of slavery and 3/5 of a person and all of that, and the abolishment of slavery in 1806. So all of these things predated 1860, and you had a president in 1860 who staunchly agreed with abolishing slavery in the states, which led to the secession. I know somebody out there will be happy I said secession, right? So it led to the secession in her state, the state that she was governor of, South Carolina. They were the first to secede from the Union. But it all clearly was based on the issue of slavery. So that being said, you have to look at it and say that Nikki Haley probably dropped a softball here. But guess what? I mean, just like the faces that you see in the crowd, these people aren't too sold on the answer. And I say that only because of how they hold their face and how they cock their head and the rest of it. They're not sold on the answer, but one thing's for certain, they're in the room. So does this ultimately end up hurting Nikki Haley? No, it doesn't, especially in a primary. The people who are in this room listening to Nikki Haley are people who are going to vote for Nikki Haley. So would it hurt her in a general election? Maybe a little. Independent individuals will see this and probably either throw her a bone or give her an allowance like I did, or they'll say, oh, that's an idiotic answer. This person is an idiot. They'll dismiss her, right? So we'll see exactly how it turns out in the general if she makes it that far. I have a sneaky suspicion she probably will. Okay, I'm gonna say that now, but that I'm not trying to ruin the other stories. But I just think that this issue probably plays later in the year, and we will end up revisiting it again. So, all right, folks, that's the number 4 story. Nikki Haley kind of steps in it, but I think she'll be able to recover as time goes on. On to the number, I'm sorry, that's the number 3 story. On to the number 2 story. We have to talk about the candidates, right? So the candidates, I mean, if you think about, there's 4 candidates who are 5 candidates who are left. These 5 candidates, of which one of the 5, Ramaswamy, I believe is in the process of exiting the race. Okay. He is not spending as much money in Iowa, or actually any money in Iowa, and he pulled money in the state of New Hampshire. I think he's probably going to be out of this race after the Iowa contest. If he gets out earlier, that would be a little bit of a surprise for me. I think ultimately he'll probably be a hardened supporter for Donald Trump, right? If you notice, he's never said anything bad about Donald Trump. I mean, he's been pretty high on Donald Trump and the Trump administration and what they did the previous 4 years. So, but the others there, Chris Christie is still here. He's at 3%. Nikki Haley is at 38%. And by the way, I'm looking at the Google Trends. And that's another thing I'm going to tell you that I'm going to be really interested in following. I don't necessarily believe the polling. I don't believe these numbers. The fact that Trump has a spread on average of 52 or 51, he's 38 points up in the Rasmussen poll. The last poll, the Quinnipiac poll, that was 56 points up. I mean, that's a lot. And I just, for whatever reason, I kind of don't find those numbers believable. They just seem to be outside of the realm of, well, I don't think these people are really paying attention. So I just kind of wonder. So I look at the Google Trends. And the reason why I look at the Google Trends, because it gives me more of an accurate view of what people are looking at. Right. So I'm comparing Google Trends data versus the polling company's data. And I kind of have a sneaky suspicion that the Google Trends information is probably more consistent. So that being the case, you see Nikki Haley, when it comes to lookups, 38% of people are interested in what's going on with her candidacy, right? And these numbers kind of look like what you see in like let's see, go back to the Clear Channel. If you go back and look at some of these numbers, they look pretty close. So I think that we can probably use them as a test case to see which is easier for the American people to digest, what they see in Google Trends or what they may find in a poll, right? And I think the Google Trends are more accurate, right? So when you look at the Google Trend, here's how it sets up. You got 5 candidates left. You got Chris Christie. He's getting no traction whatsoever, but I guarantee you he's going to stay around until the convention. The same with Ron DeSantis. Nikki Haley is vested in staying around in the convention because she's getting a lot of traffic. That being said, look at Donald Trump at 42%, Nikki Haley at 38%. I'm here to tell you, I have a sneaky suspicion that the race in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and the contest prior to Super Tuesday are probably much closer. And I'm about to find out. So stay tuned. But when you look at the candidates, we know they all kind of they're in this weird lane, right? They're in this weird lane where they are running against a previous president, and they really haven't done a good job of making the case that the people should adopt them as opposed to the previous president. right? So Donald Trump, right? So Chris Christie is probably the most vocal about it, but that 3% that you see here, it makes sense. I mean, when you look at the party, they're not rallying around Chris Christie because they don't like his message. He's too hard on Donald Trump. When you look at Nikki Haley, she's saying some of the right things, but I just think in certain cases she's not hard enough. So she needs to be able to step out of that shadow and say some things that aren't popular. Now, I will say, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, you can tell that Trump's attention has been taken away from Ron DeSantis. He's no longer worried about Ron DeSantis. A lot of his commercials, especially in places like New Hampshire and in Iowa, are now trained on Nikki Haley. And I guess there's one about Nikki Haley raising the gas tax in South Carolina when she was governor. And, they're saying that she's flip flopping, right? And this, a kid brought it out during one of her stompings, right? Stomps at worth that he brought out the fact that people compare her to John Kerry in 2004. She's a flip flopper, and of course, she said that people like Chris Christie are hard on the president, are too hard on the president. Then there are people who aren't hard enough, and she kind of painted herself as a person who was interested in getting the job done, right? And I'm paraphrasing. And she also mentioned that part of the job of getting the job done was making sure that once she's president, Trump gets a pardon because the American people need to move away from this space. And she's right. It's a dangerous space to be in. And she could be the person to move us away from that space. We'll see, right? We'll see how it all turns out. But again, the Google Trends when it comes to the candidates tells us everything that we need to know. So this leads me to the number one story in our broadcast this week. The number one story is Iowa. When you look at these Google Trends and you start thinking about what happens in 16 days, we have the Iowa caucus. And remember, this is a caucus. This is run by the Republican Party, right? Not the state of Iowa. And in the contest, the governor for the state, who's Republican, has latched on to Ron DeSantis. Nikki Haley has a lot of PAC money. People who've left Ron DeSantis's operation have gone over to Nikki Haley when it comes to the money. So she will be a player. And of course, Donald Trump is the juggernaut in that state. It's a caucus state. They meet on the 15th, right? Everybody has to be there by like 7 o'clock. And there's like, 1,900 different locations around the state where people will cast their ballot for their particular favorite, right? And then that information is tabulated offsite someplace. And then the information is given to the county chairperson, and the county chairperson relays this information to the party heads. And we'll have a number by the end of the night. But I look at the polling data. Let me go back here. Look at Iowa in particular. I look at the polling data with regard to Iowa, and Trump is 30 plus 32. I got to tell you, I don't think these numbers are that high. I just don't believe these numbers. And I don't believe Ron DeSantis will finish second. I believe that Nikki Haley will probably, and that's going to be strange. So I'm going out on a limb right now. I'm telling you that I believe Nikki Haley is in the second position. I also believe that between Nikki Haley and Donald Trump, this will be interesting. These numbers that you see here, I get my little annotative tool here. These numbers here, this will be interesting. If it's that close, if it turns out to be that close in the state of Iowa, I believe that it's Katie bar the door. I think it becomes a presidential contest where Nikki Haley becomes a juggernaut. I do. So if she's that close in Iowa, I think it sets up well for her in the next big state, which will be New Hampshire. Now, there's some other contests along the way that also will be determined by what happens in Iowa as well. So you got New Hampshire's the next big contest. If she could get a victory in New Hampshire, not second place, not third place, but if she can get a victory in New Hampshire, I'm telling you, I think she's going to run the table. I think it will look a lot like what happened in 2020, where you got to admit Joe Biden was not even on the map in Iowa, in New Hampshire. But you get a guy down in New Hampshire that says something good about him, and then all of a sudden he just catches fire. And I think that she could be that particular person. People have seen 4 years of Donald Trump. And it is, as Nikki Haley points it out, it was a chaotic 4 years. Now, in certain cases, you may say, oh, well, they were against him, right? Well, but there were certain areas where I think he did it to himself. So there are things that you're going to look at and say, I'm not quite certain that the American people want to go back there. And if they are looking forward, Nikki Haley may be that person that they will be able to listen to in moving or advancing this ball for, let's just say those Republican causes. So we'll see exactly how it turns out, but Iowa will be pivotal, not pivotal, but anyway, pivotal. And it happens in 16 days. I don't know about you, but I got my drinking game ready, right? I'm interested to see how it all turns out. I'll know how drunk I will be on election night or that primary night or caucus night, right? Based on the information. I just think that Nikki Haley, it sets up well for Nikki Haley. If she's within single digits, I'm a winner. If she's not within single digits, for every 10 points, I'm going to say that's 2 drinks. so, folks, I just look forward to a great election cycle. It starts in Iowa. Folks, this is the #1 story. Iowa is on the doorstep. It paves the way for everything else that happens in 2024. We'll see. And of course, these court cases that Donald Trump will find himself embroiled in, guess what? They're going to play a part. They're going to play an important part in all of this. There's no way around it. Those 91 counts, there's no way around it. They're going to play a part in the American people's psyche. Right? So we'll see how it all turns out. But folks, hey, guess what? That's the show. I'm looking at this Colts game versus the Raiders. I'm pulling for the Raiders, but they're now down by 2 touchdowns. I'm not happy by that. Well, not 2 touchdowns. 10 points. All right. So, but there's plenty of time. Remember, the Colts blew it last week, so it's quite possible they'll blow it again this week. So that being said, I'm going to go enjoy this game. I want you to go enjoy your afternoon. Hey, happy 2024 to all of you. Look forward to more content delivered to you into the future. And I want you folks just to be safe. Whatever celebrations you plan for your New Year celebration, just be safe and look forward to seeing you in the future. Have a great day.